Welcome back, everyone. Our last conic is going to be the hyperbola. Hyperbola can be used in various things. Given two fixed with a fluid in between, gravity will pull it into the form of this shape. We'll start with the definition. It's the set of points, so the points on the actual graph, where the distance from one to a focus minus the longer, minus the distance to the other focus is going to be a constant. That won't change. So that's going to be the same value. So d sub 2 minus d sub 1 is going to be a constant. Does not change. There are two ways that the equations of a hyperbola can look. Here, this is centered at the origin here. So this is x squared over a squared minus y squared over b squared equals 1. Now notice in this case, the y part is negative and the x part is positive. This one, it's exactly backwards from that. The y part is positive, the x part is negative. That brings us to a few things. The vertices are units to the center. The foci are c units, and the equation that we have for this one is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Looks familiar. And you can see triangles end up here often as well. All right. When we have the x part first, we have what's called the horizontal transverse axis, meaning the horizontal axis cuts through the graph. And the horizontal transverse axis is going to have the foci on it. Now, when it's the transverse axis. Now, here we have the y part is positive and the x part is negative. Here, the x part is positive, y is negative. In this case, when the y part is here, we get a vertical transverse axis. And I want to sort of give you a way to remember this. When the x part is positive, notice we're going in the x direction, the graph is. And when the y part is positive, we're going in the y direction, the vertical transverse axis. So there's a description. Let's actually do some examples here. Now, in addition to having foci, these also have what are called asymptotes. Now the asymptote, you can see that's the dotted line here and the dotted line here. Meaning this graph is going to get closer and closer and closer to that invisible line, but never actually hitting it. Here, when we have a vertical transverse axis, we have the asymptotes, and this gets closer and closer and closer, closer and closer and closer in both directions. And the equations of the asymptotes are y equals, this is when we go through the center, b over a, x, and negative b over ax. And that will be helpful for us here in just a moment. See that here as well. Using that information, let's find an equation based on this. So we'll go part A, I'll do up here. So we have a center at 0, 0, that's always nice. A focus, meaning C, is 8. And because it's on the y-axis, that means we have a vertical transverse axis. We also have that B is 2. Let's call it A, that way it matches the picture. That way the A is always the first one. Some teachers don't switch it like that, that's okay. So to get what's missing, we have 2 squared plus b squared equals 8 squared. So 64 minus 4, b squared is equal to 60. So our equation is going to look like this. Y squared over 4 minus x squared over 60 equals 1. Part B. Our foci are plus or minus 6. Looks like we're going through, the center is at 0, 0. So this means that C is 6. We have an asymptote, y equals negative x, and we know the asymptote is going to be a negative b over a x. So if we divide out the x's, which we normally can't do because we're assuming that x isn't 0 when we do that. Get rid of the minuses, multiplied through by a, we end up that a equals b in this case. And you can see when a and b are the same, we get a -1, so they match up. What that tells us is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. We can see this becomes a squared plus a squared equals c squared, which we know, 36. 2a squared equals 36. A squared equals 18. So here we end up with our equation, x squared over 18 minus y squared over 18 equals 1. By the way, we know that it's a horizontal transverse axis because our foci are on the x-axis, -6, +6. So that's why the x part goes first here. And part C. So we have a foci at 4 and 10. Now it looks like it's going to be our center. It looks like I'm going to take the average of these two because that so 10 plus 4 is 14 divided by 2 is 7. So this means that C is 7 in this case. C is 3, pardon me. The center is going to be at 7. So our center is going to be at 7, 10. Now, I know that because, once again, 10 plus 4 is 14 divided by 2. There's our x. The y is still going to be the 10. And how far away is the foci from the center? This is, again, the center. How far away from the center is it? It's going to be a distance of 3. So 4 to 7 is 3. 10 to 7 is also 3. So that's why C equals 3. Now they give us the vertex is at 9, 10. So that tells us that a squared, oh, and by the way, you can see the foci are in the x direction. So we're going to have a horizontal transverse axis, which means the x portion is going to go first. So because we have a distance here, because this 9 is exactly a distance of 2 from the vertex, that means that our A is 2. So to find our B, that's going to be 2 squared plus B squared equals 3 squared. So it looks like B squared is going to be 5 in this case. Now remember, with the center, it's going to be the opposite sign, x minus 7 squared over 4 minus y minus 10 squared over 5 equals 1. All right. Find the center, transverse axis, vertices, foci, and asymptotes. So we're going to find a little bit of everything here. First off, we can see that the center is at 0, 0. So there's one answer. Now, because the y part comes first, that means that we are going to have a vertical transverse axis. That answers that one. The vertices are going to be, again, it's vertical, so it's going to be in the y direction. So it's going to be plus and minus 9, it looks like. So the vertices are going to be at -9, 0. I'm sorry, the other way around. 0, -9, 0, 9, because we have a vertical. Yeah. And the foci, I'm going to have to go 81 plus 16 equals c squared. Not sure what that is. Let's see, 81 plus 16. That is c squared. Not 16. Yes, 81 plus 16. And that is going to give me here. We end up with 97. So the foci, so C is going to be plus or minus root 97. So that means that our foci are at 0, root 97, and 0, negative root 97. And we have asymptotes. So remember, asymptotes are, so asymptotes are y equals plus or minus b over a x. So in this case, that is going to be y equals negative 9 over 4 x. Yeah, plus and minus. So it's actually two equations. Not too hard. Just got to kind of piece everything together. All right. So now we're going to actually graph these things. So let's start with part A. Part A, we're going to start at the origin, very nice. We're going to have a horizontal transverse axis. So they're going to be going like this. And it looks like for part A, looks like the asymptotes are going to be y equals plus and minus 3 over 2x. So let's build that in. So up 3 over 2, of course the center's here, and up 3 back 2. So we have I'm doing this in red because it's not actually part of the graph. This is just a guide for us. And we can see that the vertex in this case is going to be a distance of 2. So here's our actual 1, 2, 2. And so we're not going to get any closer than that. So the blue is the actual graph. So there's our first hyperbola that we've drawn. All right, part B, we have a little algebra to play with. So let's go up here. Now I'm going to complete the squares. This is part B. So y squared minus 4y. Now when I complete the square, take the negative 4, cut it in half, negative 2 squared, that's plus 4. And for this, I'm going to factor out a negative 4. I'm left with x squared plus 2x. And completing that square, I'm getting 2 and a half is 1, 1 squared is 1. Now I got to be careful. I didn't add a 1 to this side. I actually subtracted a 4. And I'm going to move that 4 over, so I get 4 plus 4. And in reality, I subtracted a 4 over here, so I'm going to subtract 4 here. So we end up with here, squared equals 4. And when I divide through by 4, I get y minus 2 squared over 4 minus x plus 1 squared. And we could leave it like that, but just to kind of emphasize, I'm going to slap a 1 underneath that. All right, so it looks like our slopes in this case are going to be, this is going to be up and down, meaning we have a vertical transverse axis. And we are at the point, let's write this center in. So in opposite sign, -1, +2. So there's our center. Now our slope is going to be up 2 and over 1, and up 2 and back 1. So here is our asymptotes. And we know this is going up and down. So our minimum is going to be 2 in that direction. So 1, 2, we're there. Down 2, we're there. So there we are. For our last one, all I have to do here, now this one's a little tricky because you can see if I divide through by -144, do that down here. So 144 divided by 16. So that's going to actually be, we're going to get down here, so it's hard to see. We get -y minus 3 squared over 9 plus, right, minus over minus, x plus 2 squared over 16 equals 1. And more accurately, I'm going to rewrite it so we can clearly see this is going to have a horizontal transverse. All right, so here we have a center at -2, +3. And in the x direction, which again, we have a horizontal transverse, we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And our equations for the asymptotes are going to be y equals plus or minus 3/4. Right, so here's our centers. We're going to go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. Our asymptotes. And the actual graph. Ooh. There. Here we are. That is your hyperbolas.